Beautiful. Thanks, Ben. Right. So I wanted to talk about, thanks, Lisa, this idea of capable context. And it's something that's befuddled generations of leaders. And the truth of the matter is that what science is doing, particularly big data, is starting to kind of make the invisible tangible. So this is why we live in such extraordinary times. I think we are right at the beginning of a big data revolution. For myself, who talks to a lot of different people from different aspects of the technology spectrum, I'm only just starting to understand just how powerful that science is, and that new sort of iteration of computing power and what it brings, particularly benefits. So this little phrase, this story of two fish swimming along, minding their own business, and an older fish swims by and says, "Morning, how's the water?" And then about 2 minutes later, the two little fish go, "What the hell's water?" Is really alludes to this idea of culture, or what I call context. And the guy called David Foster Wallace said the most important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. And that's very much been the case about culture. I think, CEOs will talk about having a great culture, or having an innovative culture. HR talk about the importance of culture, but really, I don't think anyone has started to map what that actually means until the last couple of years. Now, all of us have seen this slide a couple of times, that organizations, we love to think they're hierarchical and mechanistic and work like big machines, but they don't. They're organic, and they're human enacted systems of interdependence. And therefore, this question of culture, now that we can start sort of visualizing this complex dynamic system, we can start understanding what culture really, really means. And that's why I think we're in such exciting times. Now, this great shift infographic I did some time ago, and it's become more relevant over time. I did this probably about 2 years ago now. And we focused most of our time at the bottom of the infographic, talking about individual thriving and team thriving. And now I want to talk about, well, these teams sit in the context. And that's really the focus of today. So on the left-hand side of this great shift model, the organizations, if you look on the left-hand side, are focused on not losing. And their values are about profit maximization. So if you look at General Motors here at the bottom, it's all about profit maximization. And what tends to happen is that they sort of thump along quite merrily, trying not to lose, and then they hit a crisis point, like the 2008 global financial crisis, and all hell breaks loose, and they sort of profits plunge, they reduce headcount very aggressively, and so on, and they make some changes, and then they go back to their old habits of trying not to lose market share, I'll create a new product, but it's really about trying to capture market share and not lose market share where we had already some great traction. So a lot of the car companies are trying to bring out electric cars, for example, but they're way behind Tesla. So that's what we tend to see. Now, on the right-hand side, we've got a very different kind of culture. And that's come predominantly from, I think, more inspired CEOs and senior decision makers creating amazing teams. And they are focused really on what I've called here higher vision. So these guys are focused on not losing, whereas these guys are focused on a higher vision. And as a consequence of that, you've got someone, now I've deliberately picked Southwest Airlines because when I talk about this higher vision stuff, people tend to think of Google's, Airbnb's, the new tech companies have come along with their funky offices and their beanbags. But if you read anything about Southwest Airlines, the CEO of Southwest Airlines is the most extraordinary guy who set the company up from scratch. And he always said, look, business is really simple. He said, we look after our staff. And because we look after our staff and care about them, they look after our customers. And because the customers are happy and have a great experience, they keep coming back. And because they keep coming back, the shareholders are happy. You said it's really that simple. It's not rocket science. But when you listen to companies on the left-hand side of the model, they will say shareholder value is the most important. Everything is about profit maximization. Our people are our greatest assets, but when you watch how they operate, that's seldom true. So we are seeing a shift, because in fairness to a lot of the larger corporations, because it's so easy to knock them on the outside, many of them are starting to move to this kind of idea of the triple bottom line. Our people are as important as our stakeholder, our shareholders, who are as important as our customers. So that is at least a step in the right direction. Profitability is still important. Southwest Airlines are not in the game just because they love people. But they have this sort of broader social mission, and often companies like this will have environmental objectives. Now, I'm not sure, in fairness, that Southwest is as strong in that area, but it is the one airline that has made profit consistently for over 40 years, even during the global financial crisis. And it's because of the culture of the organization. So as I've put up here, this kind of reactive structure on the left is focused on problems and threats. So, they're looking at, market threats and how to overcome those problems. There's a significant fear-based culture. And it's not because people are bad. It's just the way that the organization's been structured. I don't want to lose my job. I can't make mistakes. We can't be seen to fail, because then we don't have the corner office anymore. We'll be sent off to Timbuktu. And it's very reactive, as you've seen here. Whereas this kind of model, and again, these are models, remember, so there's no such thing as 100% perfect. These organizations are driven by a vision. People are very passionate, and they are an action-based organization. So they're on the front foot. Southwest Airlines is a very good example of that. And if you want to see an example of an airline who've nicked some of Southwest Airlines' model, but do it in this kind of way, then you just have to look at Ryanair, okay? So it's very easy to follow the business model, forget the people and the culture piece, leaning more to the left than the right. I was about to say wrong, but it's not. This is not about right or wrong. That's the way Michael O'Leary is. That's the way he runs his business. And he couldn't care less whether you've got an opinion on that or not. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, I want to talk about Laloux's framework, and then I'm going to ask everybody a quick question. So Frederick Laloux wrote a book called Reinventing Organizations. Has anybody read it? You just put it in the chat box. That'll be great, because then I know I'm speaking to informed people. If you've read it, just put your hand up. If you haven't, no problem. Okay, great, thanks. So Laloux's a really interesting guy, because I'm a big believer in you can't understand the detail of a problem unless you understand the context. That's been my experience all my life. And last week I said that one of the problems with organizations now, and it's to do with the master and his emissary, the book I mentioned last week, is that we've got left brain, right brain. Left brain is not logical and sequential, and right brain creative. That turns out to be complete bollocks. Left brain is detail, right brain is big picture, and they both work at the same time. The problem in most organizations is we're focused so on the detail, we don't see the big picture. So we can't explain culture without understanding the context within which culture sits. And what Laloux's done very well is he's explained sort of what he calls a societal sort of context within which we're starting to see different forms of culture evolve. So if you look at the smaller circle here, the red one, the sort of power, fear, the command, authority, power and fear and chaos, or how we run these kind of cultures. These are the sort of alpha leaders, very much short-term type of leadership style, fear-based culture, and he's used an example there of the mafia. That would be a good example of that kind of culture. But that's how many of our initial, if you go back through history, to the knights of old, and that had total authority, and everybody kowtowed to it. This is really what Lou's talking about. Then we started to evolve. As a society, we started to evolve, and our organizational models start to evolve. And in the yellow level, which began around about 4000 BC, we start seeing things like organized religion. You've got a kind of hierarchical structure that starts to come out of that. This goes through to the Industrial Revolution. Status then becomes very important, stability, control, the mechanistic view of organizations, and they have a longer term process perspective, but this is where process and process thinking started to come about, you know, the Tayloresque view. We're now into this era. I think this is where many organizations still are, which is this orange area where we're in this world of being about achievement and focused on measuring performance and the importance of measurement. It's meritocratic, still mechanistic though, in terms of how it sees the world. And it's given an example, Lewis given an example, large corporations here. And I think that is the bulk of many organizations that we deal with in RadTag. However, the positive news is they are starting to make the move towards this level, the green level. So anybody in this group who's involved in the world of Agile will recognize this enormously. So you've got Agile, Lean, you know, those kind of models. They're really important because what they're doing is moving these organizations now, particularly with COVID-19, have realized that their inflexible structure is no longer viable in the kind of world where it's become very unpredictable and volatile and so on. So in the green level, it's more about community, empowerment, fairness, values driven. This is where servant leadership came from. The right side of the model that talks to the 30% of our brain, which is, you know, focused on thriving, rather than the 70% of our brain, which is generally focused on survival. So stakeholder balance, which is what I mentioned earlier. Culture over strategy, which we're going to go into in a little bit more detail now. Delighting customer, shared values, all of those kind of things. So for me personally, this is a great model to explain the societal shifts that have helped us to understand the organizational shifts that are occurring. And then at the teal level, which is this top level, we're starting to see a few more changes again, a sort of a more mature way of running things. So you've got Morningstar and Berthold, Patagonia, which is an anti-fragile type of model of running organizations. Personally, I haven't seen enough yet from that area to talk about it in a comprehensive way. It takes an awful lot of maturity, not only at the individual level, but at the leadership level, to create that kind of environment where you've got what I call effective self-management. You're still hitting the outcomes that organizations need to. They're not there just for the fun of it, and so on. But there are companies that are already operating in that way and doing it quite successfully. So, so there you go. Now, the question I had is, how would you describe the culture that you're in? In you look at these layers, and what's your evidence for that? What are the symptoms of that? So I'd be keen to understand what kind of spread we've got, whether you feel you're in the green level, whether you're in your sort of orange corporate level, or you're hovering somewhere in between in your process of evolution, because that would be helpful to understand. I'll give you a couple of seconds to type that in. And again, I won't burst into song because I might terrify people. Now, if you're a consultant, for example, it'd be great to know what kind of cultures you typically find yourself in, what kind of clients you find yourself dropped into regularly. because we are seeing, certainly from a RANTAC perspective, a real shift, even amongst some quite traditional organizations, to this green level. Thanks, Pete. Largely red and green. So that's good to know. I'm assuming you mean this orange level, because the colors haven't come through very good. So yeah, I'm with you. So what we're seeing is a tremendous shift in culture, much quicker than normal, and that's quite normal as well. We see that when people are in this survival mode, where they know that dramatic change needs to occur. So all good. If you're still typing, don't worry. I'll come back to it. So how do we make this visible? So we've got a sense now of what they look like and some of the symptoms. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Yellow, orange, but talking to greens. Thanks, Michael. Brilliant. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a hell of a lot more than that. And I think because I'm talking about virtual teams and how to create virtual teams, there is a very specific reason I'm talking about this context thing, because I'm pretty certain that a number of companies are going to stick to a number of staff members, if not remaining virtual for 100% of their time, then a portion of their time will be remote working. So there is a reason why I'm tackling this subject. So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to share with you a little piece from a chap called Alex Pentland. So just bear with me 2 seconds. All right, I'll start sharing my screen again. Now, could you just, once again, give me a quick, yeah? You can see that fine, Alan, no problem. Super duper. Right, so I'll turn the volume up. Thanks, Chris, Stu. All right, so I'm going to turn the volume up because it's important. A little piece from, this is Alex Pentland. He's really the genius behind social physics. This will help explain what we're talking about today. So over to Alex Pentland.
What we find is that our modern society is built on really ancient foundations. So hundreds of thousands of years ago, there were humans, and we were a social species, but we didn't have much in the way of language. But what we did have is signals.
The joys of YouTube. It'll kick back in 2 seconds.
You want me to talk about when I come home at night and my sons ask me what I did today? And I actually say, well, really, I had a meeting to talk about what are the core attributes of a Disney princess.
This is hilarious.
One of the most
signals of dominance, right? Signals of fear, signals of interest, and so forth. And that formed us into a social unit. And we were more fit than other species, which is why we're here.
Okay,
today.
so he's talking about these ancient patterns.
And when we got language, we didn't throw all that out. We built on top of it. And what that means is that today, you can observe these signals in people, even though we have language. So we think we're doing all this other stuff, but we're often signaling something quite different. And using computers and sensors, you can look at that stuff, even today. And that's really the change that's happened. So what are some examples of this? Well, here's some examples. Think about energy, the amount of sort of nervous energy you have, how much you move. That's your autonomic nervous system, your fight or flight system. And when you're interested or scared, what happens is you move more and you move faster. And so when we turned our computers and sensors on poker players, we found we could actually tell when they had a good hand and tell when they were bluffing. And we could actually make money off of them. Sort of the first social science experiment that was profitable. Yeah? When we went to a bar, we looked at speed dating. So people talk for a couple of minutes. Secretly, they're supposed to write down, will they exchange information or not? And we could tell if they were going to do it without knowing anything about the people or listening to words by looking at the pattern of engagement. So if it was really tight, like a dance, turn taking, very sharp, they were going to do it. If it was something with a lot of interruptions and blank spots, it was a no-go. Interesting, right? Mimicry. So mimicry is like, you know, I nod my head, you nod your head, you smile, I smile. It's a sort of automatic thing people do to show that they're understanding each other. It's largely unconscious. But in sales or negotiation, it's key. For instance, a friend of mine did an experiment where he showed that you could get up to 30% more sales if you had the right amount of mimicry going on, as opposed to the wrong amount. That's something to pay attention to if you have to sell a proposal or anything like that. So human behavior is a little like a dance. It's this turn-taking between signals, right? But you have to look at the bigger pattern to figure out what sort of dance it is, because the bigger pattern of all the people is how the ideas move around, okay?
Okay, so I'll stop there. So what Alex is talking about is the next generation of how we understand organizations. I don't think many people have cottoned on to how revolutionary this will be. And he talks about understanding the bigger picture. Because when we understand that, then we understand how we should run our teams, how we should build our organizations. So I thought I'd do a little exercise. And if you've got a pen and paper with you, let's start talking about what that bigger picture looks like. So we're going to do it in a very simple way. And I'm going to take my trusty whiteboard. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to draw your professional network. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm just showing the screen around. I want you in the middle of a piece of paper to just draw a wee dot in the middle and then put me. That's me. Now around me, Alan, I have a number of people that I talk to regularly. So I'll just put, I've got Gus there, Rod, Joanne, Ryan. So these are all people that I talk to in my network regularly. Pete, wise man, here, and so on. Now, there are also people that I talk to regularly in my professional network. They're not necessarily in sort of my team, and sometimes not even in my organization. So outside of this, I've got people like, say, Mauro, who's an AI specialist, Uma, who is a data scientist, Catherine, who's an amazing business coach, and I won't forget some of the other team that I talk to who we're not in similar worlds, but so I've got Stu, who I bounce a lot of ideas off. So I hope that makes sense. If you can draw that, that would be fantastic. Have a minute or two while I just set up again, and draw your own professional network. So I'm not talking about friends. I'm talking about this network that you have, of you know, partly a team, and partly the people outside of that team that you talk to as well. I'll just share my screen. Get back to that. So we're drawing our professional network. So that's great. It's really a clever and simple thing to do. So as you're drawing, I'm just going to explain. So what Alex is basically saying is that these networks are really networks where idea flow moves through these networks. And what he means by idea flow is the spreading of new behaviors, not just ideas, but habits and behaviors. And it's central to human nature, and it's key to our success as groups. And the first aspect of it is what he calls patterns of engagement, right? So what you've just drawn is a pattern of engagement. Now I'm just checking everybody can see this okay. Just somebody give me a thumbs up, that would be great. So patterns of engagement. Just making sure. Let me have a look. Yeah, all good. All good. Great. Lovely. So let me just talk about that. What do we mean by patterns of engagement? It means repeated cooperative interactions that build trust and increases the value of a relationship. That then lays the groundwork for the establishment of cooperative behaviors. I'm quoting from Alex. In other words, these patterns of engagement are what build culture. Now, here's the really interesting thing. Emails, messaging, Slack, all of the kind of tools that we use for interacting, particularly with virtual teams. Most of these sort of digital media don't have the social signals associated with face-to-face interactions. So they're very poor at supporting the engagement required to develop great working groups. That is Alex's research, not my opinion. So what I want to share here is that group that you've just talked about, sort of drawn, what are your levels of engagement there? And if the majority of your engagement is through the Slack channel, it is not enough to build a tight, high-performing team. So there is a guy called Bob Kelly from Carnegie Mellon University who did a piece of research. So Bell Labs, back in the day, pre-Google, was the place where all of the greatest innovators kind of hung out. And what Bob did is identified their star performance. So if you could listen closely to this, I'd appreciate it. So the average performer thought that teamwork meant that the team members did their bit for the team. That was their mindset. The star performers, it turned out, their view of teamwork meant joint ownership of goal setting, group commitments and work activities and schedules, and group accomplishments. So it was orchestrated around social decision making. And it turns out that releases natural opiates in the body, this kind of way of working. Now, anyone who's in the agile world, that should sound very familiar. But this is Bob Kelly's research from years back. So it means joint ownership of goal setting, group commitments and work activities and schedules, and group accomplishments. So my question was, how many people here feel that that is their natural operating style, that they operate similar to these star performers in Bell Labs? There's always this sort of 10-second typing pause. Now, while you're typing, I'll just add one more thing on engagements. These are patterns of engagement. This is unearthing what good culture looks like, patterns of engagement. So where this is not healthy is when you've got a exploitative relationship. So the pattern of engagement is either unfair or exploitative. So in hierarchical organizations, command and control organizations, often that relationship is exploitative. And what I mean by that is it sounds I don't want to take it to the nth degree. It can be something as simple as, I told you to get this done, just crack on and do it. I am exploiting my position as the manager, and you're just going to have to do it whether you like it or not. So this is when patterns of engagement are unhealthy, and it causes tension and stress and all kinds of good stuff. And when one group dominates another. So this is not just in organizations, this is in societies. We've seen it over and over again. And so what Alex has been able to do is show that there's healthy and unhealthy patterns of engagement. With the Bell Labs research, I'm explaining a healthy pattern of engagement at the team level. So that's the first piece. Now, the second piece is this. So we've got patterns of engagement, and the next one is patterns of exploration. Now, you noticed in my drawing, I talked about Mauro and Umar and Catherine, and to a degree even Stu, although he's closer in. I think that that is all my unconscious way of exploring. So now Michael's just put something up, so I'll just pause there. I believe I'm fully socialized by this definition, but I'm also made my mistakes and learned from some. So there's a beautiful honesty about that. So I fall into exactly that same bracket, Michael. I was a kick-ass leader by nature, and I learned kicking people's asses from my father, who was old school, hard, bad-tempered bloke, who, if you didn't do as you're told, you got your ass kicked. And we don't realize we bring these unconscious learning styles, in leadership styles, into the workplace. You may have had a kind, passive parent, and so you're kind and passive, and then possibly you get run over a little bit when you needed to be a bit more kind of sterner and so on. So, which is why I have this issue with servant leadership, not the detail of it, which I think is great, but the title of it I don't think helps very much. Because being a leader means that there is a role of responsibility that you take. And there's a difference between service and servitude. And sometimes people don't quite get that right. But I think what Michael's pointing out is that through trial and error, you learn these things. That being more inclusive, basically more inclusive, listening to other people's opinions, giving everybody around the table a voice, all of that kind of good stuff. You know, you learn that that's the way forward. And it turns out those patterns of engagement are found in primates. So this pre-exists language. So what Alex talks about is that these patterns were how we first sort of communicated, and then language came along, and these didn't go away. We just built on top of them. So thanks for your honesty, Michael. And Pete, yeah, servant is wrong. I think that I don't want to get too distracted by the servant leader thing, but the truth of the matter is that service is important as a leader, but also, you know, there is a role of decision making. There is a role of the buck stops here. There is a role of responsibility taking that is also critical. So it's not a great title, but I know what is trying to be implied by it. So thanks for that, Peter, as well. So let's just talk about Bell Labs again. So now it's talking about exploring. And what Bob Kelly also found with star performers at Bell Labs, the people who innovated the most, had the highest performing teams, produced the most patents and all of that kind of stuff, they did what was known as preparatory exploration. What does that mean? It means that they went out and engaged with other people whose disciplines were not related to theirs. And also they were helpful, genuinely, not kind of, you know, in a cynical way. They were helpful to these other people. And that group were quite a diverse bunch, right? A diverse bunch. So what Alex is saying is that the best ideas come from careful and continuous social exploration. The most consistently creative and insightful people are explorers, seeking out people with different views and different ideas and bouncing their ideas off everyone that they meet. Now, why? Why is this so important? So what Alex has pointed out is that ethnologists have found that almost all the decisions affecting a group made in social situations are made in social situations. So it's like the wisdom of the crowd. However, there's a massive caveat to that. This only works well when the crowd is diverse. Because what I am starting to see a little bit in the Agile community is the echo chamber effect. So that we've got all of these people who are in Agile only stay in Agile, and therefore, because there's a lack of diversity of opinion, I don't think the decision making is as healthy. Now, this group, I'm going to assume, are quite the explorer, because I am talking about stuff that is, you know, social physics, social cognitive neuroscience. A lot of Agile people might go, that has nothing to do with my world. But all of us in this group know it's got everything to do with your world. It supports a lot of how you operate. Now, there's a really great piece of research that Alex did with online traders. People are day trading. And he found that the day traders who had diversity of ideas from their social network, their ROI was 30% higher than individual trainers. So this is really important. Most of our learning needs to be done. 90% of our learning comes from exploration. That's the healthy kind of perspective. And 10% is individual learning. So when I'm talking to somebody who's in AI and I'm talking to computer scientists, what I'm starting to do is put together lots of jigsaw puzzle pieces that I didn't even know existed to create new solutions to existing problems. And that's the essence of a healthy system. Healthy systems have exploration and have high patterns of engagement. You take the idea from your exploring, and in your pattern of engagement, you refine the idea, and see if it's really a cracker and how you can apply it in your own personal world. Now, what do organizations do, though? They do this. And I'm interested to see, again, because I know there's a couple of people who are consultants who walk into organizations a lot, and there's a few people here who are in organizations. So what happens is that organizations build silos. Now, people build silos. Frightened leaders build silos. So they'll create a power team, and they'll ring fence that team. And that team is my team, and don't talk to that team. Don't share resources with that team, and so on and so forth. And these silos kill idea flow, and they inhibit the kind of behaviors that do things like increase experimentation. The very things that we need to keep organizations evolving and innovating and adapting and so on and so forth, we stop that. Now, I had a guy, I was doing a piece with Stu. We were doing a piece on innovation, and there was a whole bunch of staff members in the banking world. And I said, who does exploration here? And only one person put their hand up, and a lady said, you know, I've just realized, I've looked at my network and I've realized it's an echo chamber. And if you've realized that as well, phenomenal. Then today has been worthwhile. If you realize you're not doing very much exploration at all, phenomenal. Then the whole of this exercise was worthwhile. But this chap said something really interesting. He said, yes, I go to conferences that aren't aligned with my core area. And I said, well, what's your core area? He said, IT. And I said, what kind of conferences do you go to? He said, well, I mean, I go to machine learning conferences, which are fascinating, but I'll go to ones on, you know, behavioral psychology and stuff like that. He said, except I don't tell the company because I would get into trouble. And you know, Stuart and I, who are in this world, have been passionate about innovation and innovative thinking. I'm like, are you crazy? So we got organizations that don't just kill it internally, they are actively stopping people from going out and exploring. So this can be scaled up to societies as well. So when Alex has gone to, you know, cities, he can say quite definitively now, using tracking data from mobile phones and that kind of stuff, that where there's lower and lower levels of exploration, those areas tend to have higher and higher levels of what he calls it kind of intergenerational problems. And that could be everything from, you know, drug abuse and poverty and so on. Because you're not bringing any new ideas. So the same old ideas are rolled through over and over again. Now, obviously, there are other aspects that contribute to that. But this is interesting and it's important. And remember, this is just the start. So if we can identify low areas of explorations in cities, we can then target interventions to help improve the culture of that part of the city, similar to organizations. So your teams, are they exploring? Okay, this is an important question. Are your teams exploring? If the answer is no, then how are you getting new ideas into the teams to get stuff done better? Okay, so question. Is your organization siloed in some way, and what effect does that have? So I'll give you a couple of seconds. Is your organization siloed in any way? Thanks, Ben. So what kind of effect does this have? Because this is important. This looks like a beautiful diagram with some boxes on it. But what I'm trying to point out is these patterns of exploration and engagement are profoundly human. And so the moment you have this kind of silo effect, then, you know, no new ideas, don't hear what the clients need, not, yeah, love it. So this is classic problem. I'm from an entrepreneurial background. So when I build something, the first thing I do is go, right, I need to find my ideal customer. I'm going to sit down, have a cup of coffee with them, find out what is it they really, really want. When we get big and successful, we tend to start thinking, oh, I know what the customer wants, I'll just build something. So what Ben's pointing out is one of the classic symptoms of this kind of siloed organization is they don't want to hear what the clients want. They're not interested. They want to build what they want and push it out to the world. That's what General Motors did for 10 years, and they got away with it for 10 years until 2008 came along, and then everybody realized that we were selling cars that nobody wanted. So there are some tangible impacts on that. Also, you'll see low morale. So if you've got a highly engaged team, and they start getting told, you know, not by you, but by other people, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, you can't talk to that team, no, you need permission from Mary before you can do that, no, you have to jump through these 3 hoops, then what happens is that team member eventually stops being motivated and engaged, and they go and find somewhere else to work. Okay, so I thought I would share that these are so simple, but so profound. Exploration and engagement. They predate language. They are happening all the time. If you've got them both going in your team, well done you. If you're doing this personally, well done you. If you're not, fabulous. You didn't know any of this before today, so now you've got something that you can focus on. So conference calls. I wanted to make this super practical, right? Cotter talks about this sort of stuff as being essential. Brilliant. So I'm glad that somebody like Cotter is all over this. I'm not surprised, because Cotter, Peter Senge, I think, are individuals who align a lot. This is, you know, if you look at the way this is shaped, it's systems theory and mathematics, big data, and a few other pieces that have been bolted together. So it's great to hear that Cotter resonates with this as well. So thanks for that, Pete. So in a very practical sense, what I wanted to ask is your conference calls, right? These are great opportunities to get face-to-face. Remember what was said earlier in terms of patterns of engagement. Unless you're face-to-face, you miss a lot of the social signals. That's why when RATAC does its online learning, there's a lot of this stuff, and a lot of getting people into breakout rooms to talk to each other, builds the social glue, all of the good stuff we discussed in modules 1 and 2. So that's part of the mechanics of how we built what we built. But for you and your day-to-day job and your conference calls, there's one big lesson I wanted to share. Make sure, if you're not already doing this, and forgive me if I'm teaching grannies how to suck eggs, remember that patterns of engagement are, I'll use the quote again, just bear with me, repeated cooperative interactions. That means every voice in the conference call is heard. So often if I'm with my guys, I'll say, and what about you, Rod? What about you, Ryan? Gus, any thoughts from you? These are habits now for me, but those simple little sort of habits have ensured that I'm constantly getting everyone's perspective. And I'm getting diversity of thought too. You know, so that's the first kind of tip. The second tip is, question was about how do you encourage exploration? So there's a guy called Ron Burt, who's a sociologist, and he said innovation happens in the structural holes between organizational kind of blocks, right? So he said if you're standing near a structural hole, you're at severe risk of having a great idea, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And it's true, right? So my best ideas have come talking to people who've got nothing to do with my industry. So my question was, what percentage of the time do you spend exploring? What percentage of your time do you spend exploring? So from Stu, collaborative tools like Mural offer the opportunity for people to be anonymous, thus feeling safe to share ideas. So again, I think that's a really important point. We live in amazing times. I know COVID-19 it's a really tough time that a lot of people are going through. But what it's done is accelerated people looking at different ways to socially connect and being innovative and creative. So we use Mural a lot for our training. That helps us, get people to share ideas without feeling self-conscious, which is brilliant. So then you get lots and lots of great ideas. And as Stu said, distributed innovation is alive. So if you're spending about 30 to 40%, as Pete is exploring-ish, I think that's great. Now, the fact that other people aren't putting numbers up means that you're maybe not doing as much as you should. Like 30 to 40% is actually a pretty decent amount, and there isn't a fixed number. Ben, thanks for your honesty, mate. Not anywhere near that. To be fair, when I was an entrepreneur, I got bogged down by the doingness of things. I think when you're busy as well in the working world, which obviously I get very, very busy indeed, that's natural. So this is not a negative thing. The truth is, until you become aware that this is available, then how would you know that you needed to do that, right? And now today you do. So I know Pete pretty well, and he's a natural, curious person, and will go off and start sniffing things around. For me, I think that the truth of the matter is some of the biggest problems that we're trying to solve have already been solved somewhere else, often in places we've never looked. The best example I can give of that is there was a guy who created a microchip, one of the most powerful little microchips at the time in the world. And he went around all of the big microchips manufacturers and said, are you interested? And everybody turned them down. And because it was a threat. It was a threat, and they were like, oh, we could make it, but we'd have to re-gear this and And he was in a tiny little booth in a big toy fair in Stuttgart or Hong Kong, with just a few of these microchips and a guy from Hong Kong came along who's a toy manufacturer and said, tell me about your microchip. And he said, well, it does this and that. And he said, that's unbelievable. And he said, just in one chip? Yeah. He said, I'll buy the lot. And what he did is he put it into a little robot called Robo Sapien. And so the solution for the microchip guy was in a place you would never have imagined in a million years. But, was at the heart of this first little robot. I don't know if anyone remembers Robo Sapien, but at the time it was way ahead of any other kind of little electronic robot, all because of this little microchip. So that's a story I picked up about the joys of exploration. There's these kind of opportunities to, find solutions to problems with people who've already solved them somewhere else. Okay, so Pete, mainly outside the Agile arena as well, yeah, because it is getting a bit of an echo chamber. It is starting to sound a little bit, I know I shouldn't be taking a mickey, but I can't help myself. I love what Agile is bringing to the world, okay? I'll just say that up front. But when I hear people arguing within Agile about that's not Agile and this is, and this is not Agile, but that is, it's a bit like watching, Monty Python saying, are you the Judean People's Front? No, we're the People's Front of Judea, it's just that kind of stuff. And it just makes me laugh, right? We're all trying to do the same thing, which is improve organizations, improve how work is done, improve innovation and creativity, and improve the working experience of the vast majority of people who at the minute are stressed up their egos. Right, I'll get off me high horse. Now, I thought I would do something. Okay. I wasn't Ben, although I have got your phone tapped, right? So just be careful what you say about me after this. So that's wonderful. Thanks very much. Let's do a quick score, and it's okay if you want to keep this to yourself. But I thought, how can we make this concrete, this context thing? And I came up with this Thrive and Score, and I've ran this with a couple of groups, and it was very illuminating for them. I'm talking senior decision makers. So I'm just going to read the questions. I've got the original copy here. And if you could just score yourself on these questions, don't overthink it. We'll do it quickly just for some fun. 1 means, no, we're very poor at that. 10, my organization's excellent, right? So 6 is 5 is somewhere in the middle, 5.5. So just score it 1 to 10. Poor to excellent. All right, here we go. The organization feels more like a family than a group of siloed businesses. Quick score, 1 out of 10. Right, scribble them all down, Pete, on a piece of paper. Right, so keep this on a piece of paper and we'll get an overall score, all right? So Pete's already started with a 9, fair dues. Right, okay, just keep it to yourself for now, because otherwise we'll have score envy going on. So the organization feels more like a family than a group of siloed businesses. Great, that's connection. All right, secondly, fairness. The organization treats everyone with fairness and respect. Is it 1? No, they're poor at that. 10, they're excellent at it, or somewhere in the middle. The organization treats everyone with fairness and respect. Next question. The organization helps me to feel valued because I'm recognized for my contribution regularly. That's all about belonging and status. This should sound familiar. Okay, next one. The organization encourages cooperation and connection across teams. No, they're terrible at this, which is a 1. No, they're excellent at this, a 10. Now that's about this idea of exploration. It's about patterns of engagement, all that kind of good stuff, right? Next, the organization encouraged me to give support to colleagues who may be struggling personally or professionally. This is social cognitive neuroscience, Matthew Lieberman's work. Okay, 1, no, not really. 10, yeah, great, they're excellent. And then finally, the purpose of the organization resonates with me at a personal level. So you get 1 or a 10. Now, you're going to have to get your calculators out, but see if you can add your scores up and divide them by 6 for an overall score. So you should have, out of a possible 60, let's say it's 43 or 50, and then just divide it by 6. So Stu, I'm assuming you've given yourself the organization a 6, Ben a 6, that's great. That was very fast, fair play. Mike 5s, Pete an 8. All right, so that's brilliant. So look, thanks for doing the exercise. And I'm happy to send this out to a couple of people if you want it. And I haven't forgotten about the reading list either. I have just been flat out like a lizard drinking. Chris has given it a 4 for financial services. Thanks, Chris. Calcom 6. All right, what I said to these senior executives, because they were coming out in the 5s, 5.5s, and so on. I said there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. There's all kinds of numbers you can draw about engagement and the impact or lack of it, the health of context, and so on and so forth. But in a big organization like the one I was dealing with, a multi-billion-pound organization, they were losing millions every year and losing the opportunity of millions that I can't even calculate because I don't have a structure for that yet, but that will come. If you're in the 5.5 below, you are struggling. If you're in the 5.5 to 6.5 bracket, then you're treading water. Anything sort of from 6.5 to 7.5-ish, then there's some good stuff happening. And then really 7.5 plus, then the organization's really got its act together. The context is healthy, and there's still always room for improvement. But Lincoln Nora, you'll be banging along well. Low staff turnover, high levels of engagement, great innovation, good products, listening to your customers, all the kind of stuff that we're really passionate about. So I thought I'd do that as a kind of a fun exercise, but it brings in some of the stuff that we've talked about previously, but also helps you to get an idea that you can even score your context now, which is important. So thanks for doing that. Let's finish. I'm conscious of time. Interventions. I said I'd try and give really practical things at the end of each, and I don't want to over egg the pudding here. today. So very simply, I've mentioned it earlier, just make sure every person in the team is heard. Now, that is a standard agile practice. Every member of the team is heard, every voice is heard, but it's not enough just to be heard. Because if you're dominating the conversation, so yes, I've heard you, and now I'm going to talk for the next 20 minutes, then that is an unhealthy pattern of engagement. Remember, it's this constant, what I would call democratic level of engagement that's going on. That's really important. Why? Because we're getting diversity of thought. And if I've been exploring and brought an idea in, I tend to get wedded to my idea. This pattern of engagement helps me to see stuff in the idea I hadn't seen. Maybe helps me to let go of how precious it is and realize it's not a great idea after all. So that's the first thing. The second one is exploration. Ask one of your team to go off and learn something new that will help you overcome a difficult obstacle. Now, if you're a consultant, coach, anything like that, I would strongly recommend you do the following, which is read Alex's book on social physics. I'll watch a couple of his videos on YouTube because they are fascinating, they're funny, they're entertaining, but this is the future of work. What we're going to start seeing, because, again, just be totally transparent, because Red Tack are already doing this. We understand that organizations are networks of relationships. Ideas flow through that network. Behaviors are determined by that. And innovation is occurring as a consequence of that. The traditional business model is no longer fit for purpose. This more adaptive understanding of organizations will become the norm over the next 5 years. Now, we've been banging on about it for 2 or 3 years now, but right now is a moment where all of these kind of opportunities have collided. So I'd say if you're in that world of coaching and consulting, get up to speed with social physics and some of these sciences. Big data, AI, they will change the game because they are already changing the game. So any questions? I've got 2 minutes left, and I just wanted to see were there any questions or observations or perspectives that would help the rest of the gang. That would be great. I'll give you a couple of seconds to type. So remember what I've covered. Organizational models have transformed as society has transformed, and society is going through a big transformation right now. As a consequence of that, we need to be able to see inside what does an organizational culture look like? What does context look like? Can we map it? The answer is yes, we can. We call it a complex adaptive system. Great. What is a healthy complex adaptive system? Social physics. It has patterns of engagement and patterns of exploration. And that when you've got both of them working well, you've got a really strong culture and you've got a strong context. What else is in context? Well, we know connection is important, fairness, belonging in status, reciprocity, empathy, purpose, and so on. So can we score our context? Yes. And if it is a 4, we know that we're in a shit context. That means I will need to work really hard with my team, and I need to work really hard to ensure that they're well. It also means, now that I know about it, patterns of engagement and exploration, that I need to be very conscious of this if I want a healthy team, particularly a virtual team. Because the modes of connection, the vast majority of them, don't resonate with the signals we need to build strong relationships, influence behavior, improve teams and engagement, and so on. Now, here's the big question. How the hell do we change these organizations where there are 4s and 6s and 5s? So next week, I'm going to invite Pete along. The two of us we're going to talk about business agility, because I think we need to look at the context of what we mean by business agility. There's lots of opinion, and I'm not interested in opinion. I'm interested in fact. So Pete is one of the founders of Red Tack. He's been around a long time, and a lot like a few of the people here in the group, you've learned a lot through trial and error. Now, I know scientifically how you get these organizations to be adaptive and innovative and great places to work. Science. And then Pete, through trial and error, has come from this direction, and yet we met in the same point. And it's profoundly important through experimenting in the real world, through lots of other people experimenting in the real world, we found this meeting point. And that's what we're going to be talking about next week, business agility. The week after that, I'm going to explain how large-scale behavioral change works. Okay, and again, it's all based on science, and the physics of it and the psychology of it is very, very rigorous. And it's a model that anyone in this group can copy and follow. Okay, anyone in this group can get going in your own organization. So the idea that I'm in a shit organization or culture and it's just me and my team, I haven't got a chance, is simply not true. So week 5, I'm going to explain how you can change the world, right? But next week is about business agility. Let's get some concrete stuff together about what it means, and then we'll have some concrete interventions at the end of it about how you can enact that in the real world. Okay, so any last statements or questions would be lovely to hear. We're in exciting times, by the way, lovely people. This is a really extraordinary time that we live in. All good? Brilliant. Okay, Ben, that's great. I'm delighted about that. I have offered, and I'll offer it again, if there are any particular issues which are quite private, just drop me a line. I have caught up with a couple of people during the week just to talk about a couple of things. Happy to support you that way too. Michael, you're a diamond, mate. Thanks a million for that feedback. If you want to get the recording out, spread it far and wide. This is about trying to help people to lead with less stress. I remember when I burned out, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Not in a million years. I had a 4-year-old daughter staring over the bottom of the hospital bed, wondering whether I'd had a heart attack or not. So this is about doing amazing things. Remember, I said it right at the start. Building amazing stuff. Doing amazing things, but not killing yourself in the process. So on that really positive note, I wish you all the very best, lovely people. We'll see you next week. Another exciting session with Pete. I won't be driving it as much. I'm going to be picking Pete's brains, really. And in the final session, the week after, is about, right, this is how change really, really happens. And if any of you got a CEO, they need to hear the recording, because their model for change is generally, in our experience, fundamentally flawed. And it costs time, it costs money, and often it costs people's jobs. So let's start doing it a much better way. So God bless you all. It's been a real joy. It's a real privilege for me to be able to hang out with you. And look forward to seeing you next Thursday, all right? So have a great weekend, all right? And look after yourselves. Stay healthy and stay well. Take care. Thanks a million. Thanks, Chris, Mike, Dave, Pete. God bless you all. I'll see you later.